Today is November the 11th, 2013. It's Veterans Day. I'm one of the few remaining veterans, just out of luck and good genes. About 2 weeks ago, the news was filled with the events of a horrible typhoon that swept across the Pacific, particularly hitting the Philippines. The news print focused on two cities in the Philippines that were familiar to me because of my experience there in World War I, World War II. The first was Tacloban and the other was Cebu City. I was assigned to the Alamo Scouts at Tacloban in January 1945. I was taken from the 35th General Hospital in New Guinea, where I was made a dermatologist. I was bored to death. I knew a little bit, learned a little bit of dermatology, but it was exciting to no one except my chief, who was a dermatologist from Baltimore, Maryland. Anyway, the chance came for me to be assigned out of my position as a dermatologist, and I was sent to the Alamo Scouts station at Tacloban at the southern tip of Leyte. There was a small village of Filipinos, and the Scouts had set up their unit at the mouth of a small river. It was placed there so they could use their power boats to go out scouting into the Gulf of Leyte and wherever else they needed to be. I learned that the Alamo Scouts was a unit dedicated only to gathering intelligence about the small islands that were to be either captured or leapfrogged on the way to the final battle for Japan. The unit, Alamo Scouts, had been set up by General Krieger, the commanding general of the 6th Army, and he made the unit directly responsible and responding only to him. The unit was given whatever it needed, whatever supplies they needed, medical supplies, alcohol, whatever unit's supply needed in any way or any form, they had priority. The unit, of course, had officers and enlisted men. The Scouts themselves were mostly officers, and their plan was to be dropped off to an island that needed scouts to determine what was going on there and what strength the Japanese held. They were dropped off by rubber Zodiac boats, by submarine, or by small surface boats. Their instructions were not to engage the enemy in any form, to take down information about the strength of the enemy, their weapons, whatever other information might be useful when the Army would send an invading force. The commanding officer of our unit, and particularly in charge of training, was Major Niles, who was a West Point man. I reported to him. He seemed a little stiff, and I didn't have much contact with him the rest of my time at the Scouts. Second in command was Red Williams, who had been in the regular Army, and he went directly with a commission to be captain. He was not happy. He thought he should have been the commander, but there was nothing to be said about that. I remember a few of the Scouts. I remember Jack Dove, a tall, slightly overweight man who had a good sense of humor, who seemed to be kind of jolly, happy. The other was Tom Rounsville from Texas. I remember him in jungle boots, not talking much. And there was Bill Nellist. I think that's about all I remember of the Scouts. There was Lou Hochstrasser, one of the men who stayed in camp and sort of kept an eye on things. He was originally a writer, a journalist, and I think he had plans to write about the Scouts and his experiences after the war was over. We had a man in charge of equipment, and of course his job was delightful because nobody ever refused him anything. The most exciting thing that happened to me was when one of the enlisted men complained of a toothache. We had no dentist within miles, but someone suggested that the Navy was parked out in the Gulf, and they probably had a dentist on one of their bigger ships. So we piled into a powerboat and headed out. We bypassed several small ships, came to a cruiser, but it was wobbling back and forth as it sailed around. So we went on to a big ship, which was a battleship. I don't remember the name. We hailed the enlisted men aboard, asked if they had a dentist. They said they did. We told them we had a man with a toothache and we needed their help. They were glad to see a strange face, so we climbed aboard bringing souvenirs, guns, and Japanese swords and insignia and so on. The Navy took the enlisted man and his bad tooth down to the dentist, and I had dinner served, steak and ice cream. The Navy knew how to live, I will tell you. At the end of 3 months, I left the Scouts and went to Cebu City. Um, that was the other city named in the path of the storm. I landed at night, found my way to a tent and a cot. Soon I heard loud banging and a whirling, whistling noise overhead. I couldn't sleep. I asked the man in the next cot, "What is that?" He said, "Those are our Navy shells. They're pouring shells into the hillside to blunt the Japanese force so that when we land, we won't have so many casualties to take care of." So I awakened in the morning and reported to the evac hospital. I think it was the 58th evac, I'm not sure. I reported to the commanding officer. He asked me what I did. I told him I had been a general officer, medical officer, and a dermatologist. He said, "We don't have any use for dermatologists. You're an anesthetist. Here are 2 books. Read them and give anesthetics so our surgeons can operate on them." The 2 books were The Physiology of Anesthesiology and The Chemistry of Anesthesiology, both by John Adriani from Charity Hospital in New Orleans. I put on an operating set of greens and a hat and a mask, found a table, and told them I was ready to go to work. They put the casualty on my gurney. Sometimes he was a GI, sometimes he was a Filipino civilian. So while I read my books, I gave pentothal and occasionally, where necessary, drip ether. That was interesting because it was a challenge and one I really enjoyed. I soon found that I was assigned to a neurosurgeon. His work usually began late at night, maybe about 9, 10 o'clock. His job was sort of clean up head wounds and patch up as best he could. After that, his patients were sent back maybe to a bigger hospital in Australia, maybe back to the States. There I learned I couldn't use ether because it was flammable, and since he used a spark to cut off bleeding, I had to be sure I knew how to give gas and some pentothal. Sometimes I had to put the patient under deeply, and I learned to intubate them and attach the trach tube to a gas machine. I usually finished about 2, 3 o'clock, and I went back to bed while the neurosurgeon pulled out his portable typewriter and typed up the nature of his operation, giving the patients information, his wound, what we had done, what he had done. He kept all his information so he would be prepared when he went back to the Mayo Clinic to pull his material together when he took his boards in neurosurgery. Thus was the information about cities in the typhoon that brought back memories to my experiences in World War II.